And now we'll start today's program. Our opening session, Changing Perspectives on the Life Settlement Industry Looking Forward, will feature Lauren Hovey and Sasha Lundquist, both Senior Vice President at our PR partners CLYDE, and Toby Schneier, National Account Director with Insurance Newsnet. The session will be moderated by Rob Haynie, the Managing Director of Life Insurance Settlements, Inc. It's my pleasure to welcome Rob to the stage to introduce Lauren, Sasha, and Toby. Thank you again for being here today.
Good morning. I will just tell you I'm the most prepared I've ever been for a panel, thanks to these three. I have kept the questions. They're long and lengthy, big words, so I'll read them so I don't mess them up. But what I'm going to do is going to have them say a few words about themselves, because I may mess that up. So Lauren, go ahead, and then Sasha, and then Toby. Tell a little bit about yourself, what you do, et cetera, so on, and we'll get started.
Of course. Lauren Hovey. I'm a Senior Vice President at CLYDE. It's a strategic communication firm based in Washington, D.C. I've been doing communications, corporate reputations for about 15 years now. Started my career here in New York City, went to DC for a bit, now I'm back in New York. Worked with companies from small tech startups to Fortune 500, everything from building their brand, navigating them through crises, and really helping them shape public perception, which is what we're here to talk about.
And I'm Sasha Lundquist. I'm also a Senior Vice President at CLYDE. I lead our financial services vertical. So I oversee all of our clients across banks, credit unions, fintech companies, advocacy organizations within the industry. And much like Lauren, my role is really helping to shift perception, build brand recognition and awareness, particularly in industries or in asset classes that are a little bit more niche, that might not be as well known. Working with all of our clients, particularly Lisa, the last several months, from thought leadership to media relations, and certainly starting with messaging and kind of figuring out how can we build a narrative for an industry that has a little bit of a dichotomy between it's either not well known or it's known but for some of the wrong reasons. So looking forward to speaking with you all today.
Fabulous. My family would say never give me a microphone. I am a loud talker already, so I'll hold it very far away. My name is Toby Schneier. I am with Insurance Newsnet and representing our team. I've been working with Lisa just about a year now, and I've been with Insurance Newsnet for just over 3. So really, for anybody who isn't familiar with Insurance Newsnet, we are educating and the leading news source for the independent agent across the country. So really our work with Lisa has been a great opportunity to reframe that message and get the advisors on board with the life settlement space. Thanks for having me.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. So we'll start with, I think Sasha touched on it, reframing the narrative. So for an industry that is not well known or with a storied past, couldn't be us, how do we replace the narrative of confusion, misconception with one of financial empowerment? So any one of you can answer that, or all three of you. Go ahead, Sasha.
Okay, I'll start. I mean, I think it's the best question for us to start with, because ultimately the narrative is the crucial fundamental building block to being able to communicate who we are, what we do, and how we serve. When it comes to this industry in particular, like I said, I think there's a little bit of a two-path narrative that we need to be looking at. We need to correct the misinformation and the misunderstanding of our past, and we also need to help educate. And I think ultimately the way that we do that is by taking confusion and shifting it to clarity, and predation and shifting it to protection. And the way we can go about it is it has to be a deliberate shift in storytelling, in structure, and in strategy. And starting with building off of the history that we have. I think a lot of times industries that are not as well known or have a storied past want to shy away from who they were. But ultimately, if we're not saying anything, other people will, or no one will. and that caters to having a lack of awareness, lack of knowledge of our industry. We also need to bring the stories into the forefront of who we're serving, and it's a bit of a fundamental shift of framing who we are into how we serve and making it more clear what the end user is going to benefit from us as an industry.
Yeah, and just to build on that, especially that last bit, one simple tactic is going from the company or the product and shifting to the human impact, which I think Cashing Out is a really exceptional example of doing that. People don't understand nuances of industries, especially when we're talking to a general public, and trying to explain that, they're going to either get more confused, they're going to turn off, they're going to shy away. But talking about how this has benefited a society, an individual, and telling that real story is a way you get those emerging companies, those emerging brand names out there in a way that can resonate with individuals.
Awesome. And just to add, I think from an agent perspective and the work that we've been doing with Lisa, really acknowledging the past. So I've been an independent agent for 20 years, and not knowing anything about life settlements when I first started, sometimes it was a really negative, nasty perception. And it wasn't until I had somebody that I trusted who told me a firsthand experience and a story that I learned the benefits, and I learned that it wasn't, the nasty thing to talk about. So I think accepting that, we can reframe it, and then just remembering that language is the power. And instead of talking about how, selling a life insurance policy and reframing it as finding an value in an asset you already own, somebody in our Lisa board members' interviews said, and they used a comparison to a life insurance policy and a mortgage for your home. And it's an asset that you have, and really, you're not going to walk away from that home with all the value that you built, and you shouldn't do the same thing for your life insurance. So if you're here, raise your hand, because I just took it from you, and I use it now all the time. So thank you.
Perfect. So something I've advocated forever is to have like a press kit or a talking points for all of us to have, so when we're called and we're talking to the press, we're kind of all saying the same thing. Honestly, we've been doing a pretty good job lately, but a couple years ago I couldn't say the same. So brings us to the next point, which is the trust deficit. How can consistent, transparent communications build the trust and credibility necessary to move potential policyholders from awareness to action? So what are those steps that you could teach us? And before I go, I'll just mention that the PR firm CLYDE here is not a public relations firm. It's one of the public relations firms in the country. So this is a real insight from some top pros. And obviously, I've said this to Toby, but INN might be the only magazine out there that communicates this to insurance professionals. So having said that, I'd like to hear your answer.
Sure. I can start. I think this builds really well from the first question. When we're talking about establishing your company, your brand, the next step is engaging with the customers, and that's like really how you can build that trust. And from what we do, there's a variety of tactics. I think the traditional public relations, media side of things is how you put yourself on the map so people know who you are. Then there's the content marketing, the social, that's the engagement, that's the relationship building. And then there's the paid media, and that sort of goes into that final decision maker of what do we want the person that we're communicating with to actually do for us, in this case, become a policyholder. All of these things have to work together, and those are just three. I mean, there's a lot of other tactics thrown in there, but it is about transparency, it's about storytelling, it's about making sure people, A, are aware who you are, and then making sure that we are kind of acting like we know who they are too, meeting them where they are, and talking with them as they want to be talked to.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, ultimately, candor is what builds credibility. And to one of the points that you were saying, Toby, is you can't shy away from the past, and I think the evolution that this industry has experienced over the last several decades is a story in and of itself that needs to be told. When it comes to tactically sharing or strategically sharing that story, in meeting people where they are, you can have commercials on all of the big stations, you can have digital ads that are running online, social media ads. And those are going to target, if you're doing them well, they're going to target demographically speaking to the potential audiences that you're looking to target, geographically, if you're trying to hone in on particular markets, but without having a consistent drumbeat of positive storytelling through media, where you have that third-party validation. It's not just you speaking, but it's others that are giving credibility to you. That's where it makes a fundamental shift, because you can talk about how great you are all you want, but when you have others that are doing that for you, that's where you're going to see a more positive return on your investment. And so, not to jump ahead by any means, I don't remember the order of the questions, but when you have PR, you have marketing, you have advertising all working together, that's where you're going to see the biggest impact. That's where your narrative is going to start shining through.
Wow, that was really well said. I'm going to follow that. And from the work that we've been doing with Lisa this year, you know, what we have really tried to focus on is the storytelling aspect, making sure that we are educating the advisors that are going to be the expert when their policyholders are coming to them and asking them if this is the right option for them. So making sure that they feel that they are the right person to guide. Also, that not only is it an option, but it's a responsibility for them to present this to their policyholders. And really, like you said, I think a combination of all of the types of media through sponsored content, as well as getting picked up by media outlets like Insurance Newsnet, I've got to give myself one plug, to really get people thinking about the story and whether they have a firsthand story or not, providing them case studies so that when they're having those conversations, they feel like they're bringing value to the table when they're sitting down with their clients.
Okay, this is a question I came up with based upon this question that we talked about, which is, I hear, and I'll ask some audience members if they agree with me, sometimes when I give a presentation or I say something to somebody in a setting or even on a phone call, they say that it sounds too good to be true. Like, wait a minute, I'm getting 5.2 times, why don't I know about this? You know, when something, they're always worried, like, what is it I'm not telling them? So my question to you is, and I'll use this, is there a better way to say the same thing without making it sound too good to be true? Or is it that combination of things you three are talking about all at once?
I think it's a bit of a combination. I think just going toward what you're saying as far as the narrative and the message, who we are and what we do and how we serve doesn't change depending on who we're talking to. But we might pull out certain elements highlighting, if we're speaking to more from a media standpoint, to Insurance Newsnet, who's going to know the ins and outs of our business, the way that we operate, the industry, and the evolution that we've experienced. But when we're talking to a reporter, Brian did a fantastic job in talking to a reporter at USA Today not too long ago who had no idea that this was something that existed. And so it was a very educational conversation where he ran through the history, how it started, how it oftentimes is still confusing, you know, in the marketplace against viaticals. And the way that he spoke still answered all of the questions, but it was speaking to the audience and to where she was in terms of the education and the awareness that she had of the industry at the time.
Perfect.
Yeah, and I'd like to hear your sales pitch. I mean, it sounds
Well,
sounds
we say
great.
things like free. We say things like free, non-binding appraisal, no cost, no obligation, and that sounds salesy. You know, come on in and buy this Toyota.
Yeah.
It's no cost, no. But at the same time, it's actually true. You know, we're in a business where, for the most part, my commission is transparent, and when I'm talking to an insurance agent, their commission is not transparent. So they always go, "You guys are criminals," and I go, well, "Actually, maybe you're the criminal, you know, but you don't have to say that." That's kind of the point. They're arguing with you about saying, like, "Wait a minute, I'm telling the client, I'm giving you, your client, more money, and they're turning around and hopefully giving that money to you, and you're buying them an annuity, which I believe you're making another non-transparent commission." But that's what we're up against. So as Sasha pointed out, Brian talked to USA Today. What other places did Brian speak? Market Watch?
Market Watch. We've had a couple other.
Yeah, so these are things this is to benefit Lisa. This is not to benefit Rob Haynie. This is not to benefit John McCarroll. This is to benefit Lisa. And then if you're a member of Lisa, you're going to reap the rewards of the benefits. That's part of the reason we're doing cashing out. This is all PR, honestly. The greatest thing was we were doing the movie. We were like, what are we doing with this movie? How do we do it? And like, well, maybe we shouldn't do it, or maybe we should do it. And I was a big proponent of doing it. And at the end of the day, I, under the scene, said, whether we do it or not, it's coming out. And then you echoed that on the call, and I felt validated that I had said something correct on the call, that we had actually, the movie's coming out, so why not embrace our past? And I could look around this room. I can see Phil hiding behind me. We were there in the very beginning. I was there, and I did not know what I had entered into. My mother didn't talk to me for 6 months. My then girlfriend, now fiance's wife, didn't talk to me for about 3 weeks. Thought I was insane. Quitting your job, you're going to the business, that doesn't make any sense. So here we are with a business that throws out billions of dollars to policyholders, and we still get, it sounds too good to be true. So I think we need to focus on, and work with you on this, is how to get the message out, how to tell a better story than just facts and figures. The figures and facts are part of the story, not the story. And I think we all try to take shortcuts and get to the end result a lot quicker. So I'll shut up for a second and ask another question.
Well, Rob, just to add to that, because I agree with everything that you said too, and I think we, in our very first conversations with you all, Lauren and I, we talked through some of the just common vernacular that's used in the industry that already comes with a little bit of baggage, like surrender is generally not a positive term when you think about it apart from the way that it functions within the industry. Settle. Generally a settlement, not something that comes with a positive connotation. And so the language that you're using too and sounding salesy, I think the way that we started our work with you all is really taking a step back and seeing the work that you had been doing together and how we're putting ourselves out there. What is the messaging that's on our website, on our social? How are we putting ourselves in front of the world and figuring out how can we make it sound less salesy? How can we make it sound more uplifting? And to use, I think it may have been you actually who said this, we need people to realize that it's a financial tool. Full end stop, full period there. That is what this is. And the way that we make it more accessible is by bringing the terminology that we use, maybe in conversations here, and making it more relatable to someone who isn't going to feel like they're being got, like they're getting sold to. So just
we live in a soundbite society, so we're like trying to figure out how can I get my message out on this little piece of paper behind my head here at this booth, and it's always about cash now. That's how we started. That was the first ad we ever did. Cash now for your life insurance policy, and it worked. But it was a different time. It was the Vatican settlement industry. Now we're in, to your point, we're in a world where this is a mainstream financial planning tool, and those who use it, it's effective. And I guess we just had to figure out how to tell it. Maybe changing some words we use. I might have to change the name of my company. But that will be up for discussion when I get back.
we can help you with the rebrand.
Thank you. Thank you. I bet. All right, so here we'll go to another fun one. The digital battlefield. Digital presence, AI, new social platforms. Obviously, it changes, probably changed just in this, while I'm doing this sentence, saying this sentence. How important is online sentiment, and how do you manage negative commentary, misinformation, or viral criticism on social media and consumer review platforms? Any one of you?
We are, like you said, everything changes very, very quickly. We're in a digital world now that it's not about like if this will happen, it is when it happens. Online world, it's highly emotional, can be very volatile, and it doesn't have to be factual based for information to get out and everybody to latch onto it. And it's not about stopping the noise, because we can't do that. It's more about dominating the space that is most important, where our audience is, and trying to pump out either the factual or the positive stories there. What we tend to do when thinking about this, and you should think about it long before it happens, is a scenario planning situation. Say there's a low, medium, and high. If it's low, there's a couple detractors on Twitter or X that are saying things and nobody really cares, so we don't respond because you'll just feel the fire. Middle is, this is getting a little more pickup. We should maybe pay attention to it. Let's start to plan what a response could be. Let's see if any mainstream media is getting to it. What are our stakeholders? What are our other employees saying about it? And then plan. And then there's sort of like the high break the ceiling, like this is on national news. Everyone's talking about it. We're in trouble. Then you're in full crisis mode, and you should have a crisis playbook and then enact that. But it's something that everyone should plan for, because AI is changing how we communicate and how we consume news.
And speaking of AI, there is a study out there, don't ask me where it's from, I don't remember the name, but I will find it for you if you're interested, but it goes on to say that right now we're at a stage where online search is significantly changing. So if you have someone that hears a sales pitch or hears the messaging and they say, you know, I don't know what a life insurance policy is, I don't know how to settle it, and I want to ask a query into Google. Before, there was so much that went into communications, marketing, advertising that focused on keywords. Now it's on queries, it's prompts, it's questions. People are going into Google or Bing, if you're one of those, and they're asking questions. What does this mean? How should I look at life insurance settlements? Is this something that I should consider? And now, the report that I mentioned says that 80% of searches end in 0 click, which means that people are not scrolling past the AI-generated response. That is a huge number, particularly given 3 years ago, ChatGPT, Gemini, Copilot, these didn't exist to the extent that they do now. And now they're becoming synonymous with the way that we're informing ourselves. And so if 80% of clicks end in 0 search, 80% of search ends in 0 clicks, then we need to make sure that our narrative, each one of your company's narratives, are coming up and feeding that AI's response. And so if you pulled out your phones, not saying you should, but if you pulled out your phones and you asked a question about this industry into search, I'm willing to bet that some of the recent media articles, potentially some of the work that's being done between Lisa and Insurance News Net, that's what's going to populate. But until that work had started, it's going to, unfortunately, probably show stories from the past, or it might show legal news, or stories that you don't want to necessarily be defining who the industry is today and how we want to continue to evolve. So as you're thinking through communications, whether it's positive storytelling, crisis communications response, considering where you show up in search and where you show up in generative AI's response is going to be one of the biggest drivers for not just this industry, for every industry, every company, and it's something that's moving at the speed of light. And so definitely recommend, if you haven't already, start thinking through where you're showing up, how your content on your website is performing, how can you optimize it to be stronger, literally for the robots that are going to read it and serve that generative response, and how are you showing up in the media? Because if you're not telling your narrative, other people will.
And just real quick with the GEO, like Sasha said, really important. We run GEO analysis for a lot of our clients to understand where it's getting picked up. We had a client that was constantly saying generative engine optimization. So there was an article that was on their website from, I don't know, 8 years ago, and that was the white paper that was being pulled through and a lot of prompts on AI. It was outdated, it was misinformed, and their customers and clients were coming to them like, and they were confused, maybe like how you were confused about like the sales question. They were like, why do our people think this? Because they're plugging it into AI, and AI is pulling something that they forgot existed, buried on their website somewhere.
Can I ask a question on this specific?
You're allowed, anybody wanting to ask a question can ask a question.
SEO used to be based on authority. So like certain, if it was receiving more traffic, the SEO, that website would appear usually first. How does the AI generation like pull from authority? How do they know like that should be the authoritative source on what it's generating?
It's still kind of the Wild West. It changes a lot. What we do know is it is more, help me with this, like more like government websites, more owned content is helpful than a lot of the media stuff. We see a lot of Reddit being pulled through, but But it's not as simple. Like SEO really has an algorithm that GEO hasn't quite established yet, which is why like running the GEO analysis is so important, because at least you can see where it's coming from, even if we don't know exactly why. And then it's like, for some reason, these prompts are getting pulled through government websites. We need to be pitching this, or we need to be putting own content that is attached to this. We need to be on Reddit doing Ask Me Anythings. So just knowing where it's come from is helpful. But I haven't figured out the algorithm. I don't know if you have.
Not quite yet. Everything to what Lauren said, but also it certainly prioritizes media outlets as well. Media outlets that have significant reach, that are informed within trades as well. But I think what's been interesting to see is how much more focus it has on the content from companies that are serving a particular industry. And so a lot of the strategies that we've been working with some of our clients on is almost overhauling the way that they're showing up on their own platforms. Because if their website doesn't have a blog, that's okay. Not everyone needs a blog or should have one. But if they don't have that, then we need to be looking at what are the media outlets that are driving some of the generative search. And it'll be a Wild West for a while, but in particular, I think what excites me / concerns me the most is you're starting to see media companies buying into partnerships with OpenAI or with other generative AI engines. So AP, for example, bought in. New York Times has bought in. So it is our educated assumption that those are likely going to be some of the outlets that are going to be driving some of those generative responses. So as we're looking, and I'm definitely curious to your thoughts too from a media perspective, as we're looking at how to prioritize or where to focus our PR and media efforts, we're always aiming for the APs, the Reuters, the New York Times of the world, the USA Todays, just to tip our hat. But there are also outlets that are very focused within a particular industry, like Insurance News Net. Again, I'm sure if you did a generative search, their content would certainly come up. But it's been interesting just to see the pivot, because you're exactly right. SEO is very focused on domain authority, whereas GEO, I think, is very much still in the throes of getting sorted, figured out. So we're always trying to jump into content as much as possible.
Okay, small add to that, and small, I promise. I think one of the things that sets different publications apart and really does give that extra credibility is when you do have dedicated editorial. It's not just advertorials, it's not just the content that we create together to promote you and tell your stories. It's making sure that you're getting picked up by, the top outlets out there. And not only will that come up in your searches, but it also does give you that credibility so that when you are doing the storytelling and the content creation on an advertorial basis, it's still coming from a trusted source. And we work with our clients on that, just building how we reframe that story, how to tell the story in your own words as well, so that when people are going to look up, to try and find more information, hopefully they are finding that positive, and it's not just the sales pitch, but it's also the education behind it and those talking points that really will engage the consumer and the agents that are their advisor as well.
Does anybody have a question out there before I read another one of my questions? Yes, sir, Robbie.
Hi, Rob. I wanted to go back to something you said. I think it's important. When you're sitting with one of your prospective consumers or policies or want to try to broker, how helpful is it to put a simple piece of data? Give us the stories of the helpful consumers who saved their lives, got them the extra money. How about the hard data? Do you think like a single data sheet that talks about proof in the numbers over time? Is that something that would be more helpful?
Absolutely. No.
I'll answer quick, because really that's part of it sounds too good to be true. We do the data survey that Brian mentioned every year, and the number is off the charts positive for the seller. 5.2, I think, was the lowest. More, was multiple of surrender, and 7.8 was the highest. So that's significant. But that also, again, sounds too good to be true. So having the right data, I think, is maybe a case example, a single case example that's more realistic. Clients had surrender of 110,000 and got 252,000. That's
I think
believable.
Yeah,
Go
so
ahead.
I think from an agent perspective and sitting down with that policyholder, I think when you are representing yourself as the expert and giving this as one of your options, also having, I think, there are the emotional decisions being made, especially depending on who you're talking to, whether it's a high net worth client who has a policy they no longer need, or somebody who it really will mean a lot to their family. So I think based on the information, statistics might work, or that real life case study. I mean, I'd share mine, but I'd cry, and I'm an ugly crier, so let's not do that today. But it really, I think it makes a difference, from my perspective. So I think that's a great question. Thank you.
Yeah, and just to add, I agree with that too. And what I think all three of us said early on is it's a mix of the channels and the audience and the ways that you're reaching people. Sometimes when spoken, hard data does sound a little salesy, and it's the way you deliver it. But in the media sense, we love data for the press because they're going to dig into those numbers a little more. It gives that credibility of a third-party validator. So we always push our clients to have hard data because that's a story, and that's how we can tell the story. But maybe one-on-one, depending on how it delivers, that's sort of balancing all the information that we have and delivering it in the correct way is probably the best way to go about it.
Who's going to ask a question? There he is, Mr. Stand Up, Mr. Conway, so we can see you again.
Nobody needs to see me, Rob. I have 50 questions, but I'm curious about the 20% of the search queries that do attract the scroll. In other words, is there a way that we can, over time, teach people to ask the right question of the machine so that it gives them a legitimate but more supportive answer for the industry? In other words, I'm assuming everything's being measured, everything's being tracked, and I think language is exceptionally important. I'm in the life settlement business. Nobody wants to settle, nobody wants to surrender, nobody wants to lapse. I lapse all the time. But is there a way that we can convey a message that causes people to ask the right question?
I'm going to say real quick, if any of us knew that, we would not be here in the panel. We'd be on a yacht somewhere in the... Go ahead.
I do think, though, again, with the GEO analysis that we can do and seeing where people are getting their information from, we can start to see the prompts that they are using, the language that they're using, and what they're asking. And then that informs us of the language that should be on your website or in your content. If this is how people are asking the question, this is then we're going to pull it through. So our website comes up first, or that gets pulled through. So we can't really tell them what to ask, but we can manipulate it.
Let me add one other thing, and it has to do with content. So, Toby, you have produced content. Your firm has produced content for many, many years in support of the business. We're grateful for that. But my sense is that we all produce content in an effort to support our individual operations as opposed to the industry, and it becomes stale very, very quickly. And often we think it's relevant because we're all on the boat together. But it seems like we need guidance with respect to what the rest of the world considers to be relevant. So Rob's dealt with this. This guy sitting next to me has more data than you can shake a stick at and could be very helpful. But I'm just curious if we need to think more conscientiously about producing more content of the kind, understanding that it's going to change over time, and whether maybe Lisa should launch that effort on behalf of everybody as opposed to each of us trying to figure this out on our own.
So, Chris, real quick, you remember the first time we handed out the list of the data collection survey and how many questions we asked? And how many did we settle on? 4. I think we asked 80. Getting answers to those 80 would be crucial to what you're asking. No. I'll ask you another question because this is my second question that I thought of myself. Other than the retirement genius, Chris Orestes, there's only been one article in the AARP about life settlements, and that wasn't even a life settlement article. It was a how to pay for long-term care. Number 8 was a life settlement. How would an organization like ours forge a marriage of sorts with the AARP, considering they are the largest association of retired people in the United States of America, owned by New York Life, to get the information out there to a consumer through that platform? We've tried to invite, Brian has tried to invite a speaker from AARP for I think the last 3 cycles of this meeting, and one for the investor meeting. We've yet to get him. Why is that so difficult, other than they're owned by New York Life? And how could we tackle that a little more effectively as an association? And there is no right answer, but we're looking for anything.
I think without being a member of the AARP myself, or being, or being from within the organization, I think some of it does potentially come down to reputation and understanding of the industry. And I think Lisa and everyone here around the proverbial table together is making the right strident steps to move forward to helping reevaluate and kind of expand how we're currently known. My assumption, as potentially hopefully educated as it is AARP, if anyone here is aware, their magazine is the highest circulated magazine in the entire country. Ahead of New York Times, Wall Street Journal. The readership is phenomenal. And so absolutely understand why we want to be involved with them. They are certainly on our media lists. We're working to try and see if that is a placement that we can bring in. But in terms of partnering with them, I think sometimes it really is going to come down to how they're seeing us right now, because they're looking to inform their entire pool of membership of what the best options are for finance, for health, for wellness, for retirement, and so on. And unless they see us collectively in a positive light, until then, they won't include us.
And I only say that because if we come in with Lisa, it seems to be a little easier sale than just me or Coventry or.
Is there an opportunity for like a advertising partnership, maybe?
Well, that's what we're looking at. I'm just kind of saying it because it's going to get you excited about something, because that's huge. I mean, it is. I'm a member. I'm old enough to be a member, and I get both the magazine and the newsletter, which is another highly populated. That's a little harder to understand. It's just filled with ads and what have you. But the magazine itself is actually a good magazine. You know, on the cover, it's always a superstar celebrity, and it shows up. And I keep it in my office, kind of show people that the different articles. They talk about every other financial scenario known to man, except a way to sell more annuities would to get money out of a policy someone's going to throw in the garbage, and they take the money and buy the annuity. I mean, I think it's an easier sell for Lisa to get in there. Chris, I call Chris the Trojan horse. I said, if you can get in there, because he can get in anything, and he goes, well, I'll get in there, but it's not really a life settlement article. But it's the only time, if you go to the search bar at AARP and you put life settlements, that's the only thing that pops up in the last 15 years. There was an article 15 years ago. They had Doug Head was the exec director when Darwin was the exec director. That's what they had misguided that. And then 4 other advisors that I'd never heard of in my life talking about life settlements. They're just placement people to put in there. This is a garbage article. And that's terrifying to me as being in this business. So I'm glad we have the 3 of you, and especially the PR firm CLYDE, because I think that's going to be the way that that will help soften the beachhead, just to get our first substantive article in there. Not a salesy article, maybe it's a little bit of hard data, but I think more stories. We mentioned that. The movie today, Cashing Out, when you watch the documentary today, you'll see Scott Page has saved a lot of his letters from Viators telling them what they did. How many of you get letters from your clients today, in all honesty? A lot? Yeah, it's tough. Those are things that they sell, that sells the story, not numbers and what did they do with the money, what were they able to do with the money. Those are key. And if we can get those, and if we can scrub them in some way that we can share them with them, that we can get the story out there, it sells a lot better than just numbers and data. Now I'll shut up. So, yes. true. Are you willing to pay money to get an ad in there, Robin? It would make total sense, absolutely. Okay. They're going to ask. All right, anything that we missed, because I have another question if not, you want to touch on? Okay, the last, well, not the last one, we got still got plenty of time. This is one I kind of was saving for the end. Describe a tangible example of how a strategic public relations or marketing campaign can directly lead to an increase in awareness and ability to reach potential new policyholders and advisors. So I remember you were giving me an acronym, because we love acronyms in this industry. KPI, key performance indicators, should the industry use? What key performance indicators should the industry use to measure the ROI of a communication strategy? This is a specific example, not related to our business, and how we might be able to push that into action here.
Okay, I can start. I have an example,
Go.
and that was a long question. So I'll
was a long
probably,
question, but
I'll
I was-
probably only answer maybe 25%, and you're welcome in advance. So I do work with an association, MDRT, Million Dollar Roundtable. I bet everyone in here knows who that is. I've had the pleasure of working with them for the past 3 years and building their awareness, working on increasing their U.S. membership, and we've done that through a couple different ways. I mean, yes, paid advertising, but we've also worked with editorial at our publication as well as other publications to make sure we're getting their message out. Lots of digital marketing, which was driving additional traffic to their website. We had a 10%, and I'm going to just be very happy and give myself a woohoo, increase in membership inquiries last year. And then we also produced a really great piece of content with one of their members who started a women's group, and it really just was about sharing what that membership meant, telling the story, and it turned out to be such a great piece that they're using it as a marketing asset. So, so the combination of the paid digital as well as a great storytelling piece that we used to promote, but they're also using and are still using, and it would come up if you're searching for MDRT. I think that's a great example and something I would love to do with Lisa, continue the movement, what we've already started, and continue to build that awareness.
One of our other clients at CLYDE is the global insurance provider known as Allianz. If you are ever booking a trip on Expedia, Booking.com, and it gives you the option to protect your travel, it's that same Allianz, but we specifically work with their trade credit insurance division. Now, I'm sure many of you have not heard of trade credit insurance because it is not legally or regulatory mandated in the United States, but it is in the EU, which is where they are headquartered. And so we started working with them a couple of years ago on the corporate communication side, specifically to try to bring more awareness of a financial tool that is not necessarily mandated or needed like it is in other parts of the world, but something that is still worth consideration for businesses that are particularly looking to conduct trade across borders. So one of the most recent efforts that we've had is they underwent a leadership transition, and the new CEO wanted to get out there right away, do interviews, desk-side conversations with reporters, and an op-ed. So what we did is at CLYDE, we work on both the corporate communication side as well as their digital marketing, and having that integration across party line, so to speak, where oftentimes communications, marketing, advertising, they all live in their own silos. But because of the relationship that we have, the partnership that we have, we placed an op-ed for the CEO on the corporate communication side and then leveraged that as our content on the digital marketing side. So we took that, transitioned it into a digital ad onto LinkedIn, run of site display, and that within 3 months generated 80 high premium leads for the company. And so being able to show from a KPI perspective, not just getting that great media placement, that great op-ed byline from the CEO's perspective, but then how we could use that to ultimately generate actual policies for the company was a stronger showing of ROI, particularly when you have all of the different parties within comms, marketing, advertising working together.
I'm going to take us in a whole other industry real quick. One client that I had just last year, but had them for about 4 or 5 years, it's called Jackpocket. They are a digital lottery app developed around COVID when people, couldn't go to their gas station freely and buy their lottery tickets. You could just buy it on your phone. When they came to us, they were maybe live in 2 or 3 states. They were getting a lot of pushback on credibility, like, is this a scam? Like, how is this legal? So they came to us to help build their brand. And everything that we've all said there was marketing, media, content, social, and we did build the brand. But what I really like about this example and them is there's a lot of public affairs involved as well, which is something we haven't really talked about yet. Each state has different lottery laws, and to do it correctly, especially in the world of big tech where they kind of think about regulation later, we didn't. We thought about it first, so we didn't get deregulated. And before we expanded into a state, we would sit down with like certain legislators that would take the meeting with us. We'd be putting op-eds in like the right magazines that were targeting them. It made the transition very smooth. We ended up expanding them to about 30 states by the time we were done with them. And the only reason we were done with them is because their, not joke, but very aspirational goal when we first sat with them was one day we want to be acquired by FanDuel's or DraftKings. And 4 years later, they were acquired by DraftKings. So there's like all the marketing, all the public affair, like go to your KPI question. KPIs are so customary to what you want to achieve. It can be all about media and like you just want the big names, like that's your KPI. Sure, we can look at reach and impact and audience. If your KPI is going to be measured by being acquired by a huge company, we're going to have to customize those KPIs and figure it out. And like that's when the public affairs came in.
So did that answer anybody's question about KPIs? No, just kidding. Anyone else with a question? You're just looking for the mic? Okay, I've got one more, and then I think we'll end a little early. Save this one. Actually, save this one for last. This was a good one. I actually learned something in our when we were preparing for this panel. It's like I've never really learned something while I'm preparing for a panel. But again, we're talking to 3 people that never really been at a LISA conference either, so they're from a different world. So the last one is post-crisis recovery. And we've had a few of those in this industry. Once a specific crisis is mitigated, what steps should the communications team take to rebuild consumer confidence and repair reputational damage? How is the effectiveness of the post-crisis reputation recovery effort measured? So before you answer, we've had the first hiccup in industry was we were in the medical industry and they cured AIDS. So it was basically the industry was over. If it weren't for the fact that there was another company it spent a couple $1 million educating the American Lung Association, Heart Association, Cancer Association, called Viaticus out of CNA, they started what was then called the senior settlements, senior life settlements. And a lot of the people in this industry were a part of that, and the transition was made. We had another little hiccup called the financial crisis of 2008, 2009, coupled with the fact that all of our LEs changed overnight. I don't anticipate another big one, but you never know. So take us through some examples in your past lives and share with us some insight on how to fix something, if it's something as small as some damaging remarks on the internet.
Sure. I think, to get through the crisis and to rebuild, I think you have to take a step back, and it's really how you handled the crisis to begin with. Being prepared, having a playbook. What the biggest thing about in the middle of a crisis is reducing the decisions that you have to make under stress. So having the command team, legal counsel should be there, your PR team should be there, your executives that are trained on what to say and how to say it should be there. 5 to 10 holding statements that you can make right now about scenarios that are most likely to impact your company, whether it's a product failure or data breach, something with leadership. all statements sort of have a address the issue, express empathy, commit to investigation, and updating the public. So you can have those drafts. Usually, rebuilding is a lot easier when you're prepared and can get through the crisis a little bit smoother. And that's when it's about kind of moving on. You already addressed it. Let's get back to the positive stories. Let's get it out there. Moving on does depend on how the crisis was handled. Sometimes you can't. And in that case, like, you use it as sort of a lesson learned. But one of my financial clients, they had a massive data breach. It happens. It could have been kept under wraps, but the SEC had passed a ruling that you have to publicly disclose. And we were in the time frame of just trying to figure out, like, what PII was leaked, what was going on. But the hacker actually posted on Twitter calling themselves out, like, hey, we did this hack. And client did not report it to the SEC. And then it became headline news everywhere because everyone's like, these hackers are, they just outed themselves and they outed this company. It was crazy. But we stuck to our statements. We worked really closely with legal counsel because as a communicator, you want to get out there and you want to show transparency. You want everyone to know what you're doing. And we need our co-captain counselors to say, no, that's going to get us in legal trouble. We can't admit too much. So working hand in hand with like your team, giving as much transparency you can to the public without putting your company in jeopardy. And then once it's over, which it was over, once we found out that like there wasn't the PII leaked, we made sure people knew that and we moved on really quickly to like the other great things that this company was doing. And it really did die down.
I think what's most important to realize is that reputation takes years and years and years to build, but only seconds to crumble. And that happens for companies, for brands, for industries every single day. But being prepared in advance, having a playbook, having a set of scenario plans of if X happens, we respond Y. That is going to help. It won't solve the crisis, the issue, the incident, whatever scale it might be, but it will certainly help you pull out of it. We had another client who I will not share their name, but if you Google it, you could probably find it, who had a very unflattering expose in CNN that started off as an article. Jake Tapper decided he wanted to do a whole series of videos about it, which was great for us. And it specifically pulled elements of data reports, not the full report, but elements of data reports that indicated that mortgage originations coming from this client were done with a preference toward certain demographics. As you can imagine, this happened 2 years ago. We're in a very polarizing period of time right now with media, with the government, the world, we'll just say. And it was a story that was very quickly latched onto. And I think the way that we ultimately came out of it, I mean, our team was around the clock war room. We were monitoring, developing a ton of materials for their members, their board, their partners, their nonprofit organizations that they worked with already. And the way we came out of it was honestly to put our money where our mouth was. We couldn't just talk our way out of it. We had to actually show a fundamental shift from a business standpoint of how we're going to ensure that no one of any demographic, any race, religion, ethnicity, feels as though they are not getting the same type of treatment as others. And so we worked with our client who ultimately put together an Office of Financial Opportunity. It was a new entity within the organization that specifically focused on ensuring that their mortgage brokers were educated, aware of the issue, knew how to speak. They looked at all of their underwriting. And I think that was the biggest opportunity that made a substantial shift away from the story that started it to now they're being seen as a champion moving in the direction of helping with more financial access and equality. And so it's having the plan, it's making sure you have all of your template materials prepared. So if and when something happens, you can respond, but then also giving yourself the space to look at the way that you're organized as a company, as an organization, and say, are there notable changes and shifts to the way we function that can also help us in the future?
Perfect. Toby, you got one, or you
No,
want?
I am.
Okay.
I am
Oh,
not the
Steve
expert.
will ask a question, Sergeant.
And maybe this applies less to you, Toby.
That's okay.
You guys are relatively new to this industry. So how did your perceptions change from when we first, sorry, you're relatively new to the industry, again, Toby somewhat excluded from this. How have your perceptions changed since you started working with Lisa? Did you come in with, has it changed, hopefully, or maybe we've done a great job? I don't know. Just kind of curious what your thoughts are there.
I mean, I have to be honest, like I didn't have a negative perception. I didn't have a perception. Like this was new to me. So I kind of learned in real time negative is such a strong word, but some of the negative stories that have come to just emerging industry in general. So I've been learning in real time, and I got the great side of it. So I never really had that take.
No, but it's also important for us to know that you didn't know about it,
Yeah.
right?
Well, I will just say this, that they're fast learners, and I think we couldn't have 3 better professionals working on our behalf if we went out and interviewed 10,000 other people. They latched on quickly. Toby as well, because life settlements is not something that Insurance Newsnet wrote a lot about either. And that they're here working for us, and given the fact they've got other clients that we just heard about, should make us all feel comfortable that we made a good decision as an association. It wasn't a single person made this decision, and I think we're going to grow from here. This is how it happens. It's not going to be us by ourselves. I know that. So I just want to thank the 3 of you for taking the time, certainly to travel. Lauren, you came all the way from New York, so give her a hand. And the other 2 young ladies at the end of the chairs came from San Diego and Los Angeles to visit us. So we thank you for your time, and they'll be available all afternoon for questions. Steve, you can ask them questions outside. And with that, I thank you for your time, everybody. Bye-bye.